Hi everyone, welcome to My Hero 360. My name is Jill, and today is a special day as we are diving into the extraordinary journey of Eavan O'Neill. At My Hero 360, we're all about amplifying the voices of heroes worldwide, those remarkable individuals whose stories ignite inspiration and drive positive change. And today it's an honor to have Eavan here with us, graciously sharing her story. Eavan, I am just so excited that you're here. I
Thank
came
you.
across one of your TikToks totally on accident, although I think it was the universe, stepping in for us to share this moment now. And the
Yes.
TikTok I came across was one where you were documenting one of your runs, and I remember being immediately impressed by you because you seamlessly ran 9 or so miles and made it look like a piece of cake, first of all. But you looked like you had so much fun doing it. And I thought to myself, wow, that is incredible. I
Oh,
then
thank you.
became so interested, and I was watching some of your other videos on TikTok. And I figured out not only were you running 9 miles, but you were doing it with a vision disability. And that just floored me. You were so
Oh,
inspiring, and I feel so honored to have the opportunity to interview you today. So thank you so much for being here.
oh my gosh. That was such a great introduction. It was so well spoken. Thank you. I'm so psyched to be here.
Before we begin, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience, give us a little glimpse into your background?
Sure, I would love to. My name is Evan O'Neill. I'm 26 years old. I'm a Maine native, but I live in Boston, Massachusetts. Um, in my full-time career, my full-time work, I work at Massachusetts General Hospital in fundraising for the cancer department, which I can go into all about what that sort of means, but that's the gist of it. And I have, as Jillian said, a vision impairment. So when I was 21 years old, I was diagnosed with Stargardt disease, which is a form of inherited macular degeneration, and it affects your central vision over time until you go blind. And I know I post a lot about running and a lot about, my life with low vision, but it has turned out to be nothing but a silver lining for me and has become absolutely my superpower and sort of my, for the lack of a better word, like eyes into life. And yeah, running has become just one of those things that makes me feel really strong and um, helps me continue to build my confidence and resilience in having this condition. And yeah, I could go on. I have three sisters. That's a huge part of my personality. It's definitely
Ooh.
shaped me. So I have a little bit of that, like, because I'm the second oldest, I have a little bit of the oldest child, like, protectiveness and like,
Mhm.
want to do the right thing by my parents. But because I'm
Mhm.
also the middle, I have a little bit of that like nomad lifestyle and like do your own thing and kind of off the beaten path. Um, so yeah,
That's
that's
so
a little bit
cool.
about me, I think.
So your senior year of college marked a significant turning point in your life. So could you
Mhm.
share some details about the events and circumstances that led to this pivotal movement?
So I went to school in upstate New York, sort of in no man's land, like middle of nowhere, small liberal arts school. And it was perfect for me because I was coming from a very small high school in Maine, coastal
Mm.
Maine. And so I didn't want to jump into too big of a pool. So it was 2,400 students undergrad, which felt perfect for me. And I got to know everyone on campus really well. And that will become important as I tell you more about my story. But freshman year, well, I guess I should backtrack to senior year of high school is when I got glasses. I started not being able to see the board that well in class, and I was a big soccer player and athlete in general, so basketball, soccer, and lacrosse, all sports that involve using a ball and having to
Mhm.
catch or dribble or whatnot. And that also became super difficult. So that's sort of, I noticed my eyesight was bad as I grew up, but that's sort of when I first noticed that, okay, like I really need glasses and I really need my vision to be corrected, because it's affecting the way I am, how I am as a student and also how I
Right.
am as an athlete. And so I got glasses. Unbeknownst to me, they weren't really doing anything, but um, I went on to my freshman year of college and sophomore year, and I decided to declare an English major and PCA major. So I did a double major. Essentially, PCA is like the liberal arts version of marketing and
Oh,
communications.
okay, cool.
So it was a lot of reading and writing. It was a reading and writing heavy major. And that's when, as I got deeper into my major and deeper into my life at St. Lawrence, my eyesight definitely was worsening and worsening. And I started to not be able to recognize people as they passed me on campus. People would say like, "Hey, Ev," or "What's up, Ev?" And they'd be, 5 to 7 feet away from me, maybe even closer, and I still wouldn't know who it was. Um, and this was the fall of my senior year. So junior year, my eyesight got really bad. And I remember my friends and I would always joke, like, "Oh, Evan, you always say," it's funny now because of what my life has become, but we used to always joke, like, "Evan, you always call people by the wrong name," or like, "This one's interesting. You always look above me in order to look at me,"
Mhm.
which is what a lot of people with Stargardt disease do. But unbeknownst, like, I didn't know that that was what was
Right.
happening to me at the time. So, long story short, senior fall, I went home, got my eyes checked by my optometrist that I had been seeing for years. And she said, "I think um, you should go to Maine Eye Center. Something's, not adding up here." And I remember specifically asking her if she was worried. And she said, "I'm not worried. I'm more just perplexed.
Mm.
I haven't seen really anything like this before." So I knew it was somewhat serious because they had me at Maine Eye Center the next morning at 8 a.m. And I went with my mom and we were there all day until like 4 p.m., just doing tests that I had never done before, like, dilating my eyes. And they have this crazy one that like turns your eyes yellow. They check like
Wow.
all these different tests that I had never done.
Right.
At the end of the day, the doctor sat me down and said, "You have Stargardt disease," or actually, the doctor sat me down and said, "You have cone dystrophy." And essentially, cone dystrophy is like an umbrella term for an eye condition that has to do with your cones. So your eyes are made up of rods and cones. Your cones are your central vision, and your rods are your peripheral. And so they knew something that was going on with the cones in my eyes. They weren't working properly and something was not right, but they couldn't officially diagnose me with Stargardt disease. They basically don't have this machine called an electroretinogram that can look like back at your retina and like take pictures of your retina and be able to tell if you have Stargardt disease. She sat me down and said, "You're going blind, and if you have Stargardt disease, which is what we think you have, there's no cure, and have a nice day." And
Wow.
my mom and I were like so terrified.
Yeah.
And I had never heard of this. Like, I didn't know these types of things existed until the day I was diagnosed. So I
Right.
was super confused and fearful, and felt super isolated. That's essentially what happened my senior year of college. So then I went back to my senior spring. I went January 15th, 2020. I was still, how when you go to college, I don't know what it's like at your school, but we had like a month-long break for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a super, super long
Yeah.
break.
Hmm.
So I was lucky enough to get into Mass Eye pretty early because it's pretty hard to get appointments there just because it's such an amazing
Hmm.
hospital. Um, and it was at Mass Eye on January 15th of 2020 that I was officially diagnosed with Stargardt disease by Dr. Rachel Huckfelt, who's one of the retina specialists there, who's amazing and so, so talented and kind and just a great physician. So yeah, then I went back to my senior year and so, knowing I had this thing called Stargardt disease, not really knowing what that meant for me and what it meant for my future. And yeah, and then COVID hit, and I was like,
Yes.
oh,
Yeah. How did you navigate the emotional landscape, upon discovering your diagnosis of Stargardt disease amidst the backdrop of you just said of the pandemic? Like, what were your
yeah.
emotions that surfaced during this time? Like I can only imagine.
Yeah, honestly, Jillian, I think back to 2020. So I'm 26 years old now. I was 21 at the time.
Mhm.
And like you said, I'd just been diagnosed. And then 2 months later, the pandemic hit and we went home we were sent home from school, and all these things that were supposed to happen weren't happening anymore. And I think back to 2020 and I was so down.
Yeah.
Like, it was probably the hardest year of my life by far.
Mhm.
Um, for a multitude of reasons. I mean, I had a life-altering diagnosis to start the year off, but then a global pandemic a couple of years later, or sorry, months later. And then I had a few other personal things happen the late summer that I was just I it was a really, really hard year. So how did I navigate the emotional landscape? It was hard. It was really
Mhm.
hard. I rely heavily on my family and my friends. And, you know, what made it more difficult is that no one knew what I was going through. So because Stargardt disease is so rare and so different for everyone that has it, it kind of manifests itself in people differently, and no pun intended, it looks different for every person that
Right.
has a visual impairment or is blind.
Hmm.
Um, and this was my first few months knowing that I had this thing that was irreversible and incurable. And it was hard to explain what that's like to a friend or family
Of
member.
course.
I think there are things that are universal that people feel, like grief and loss and sorrow. And it was hard because had this intense feeling of loss, but it's like a slow burn because
Mhm.
I was losing this, but I knew it was going to be years of loss.
Right.
So at first, I'm not gonna lie, I was really down. When the pandemic hit, I went home and I felt super low and really, for the lack of a better word, depressed. I always remember that feeling as some that I use today that drives me, in my support group, and why, and like anytime I feel worried about posting on TikTok or Instagram, I think back to that 21-year-old girl who was so terrified and alone and really isolated. And I know that if I had had someone like me now at 26 when I was 21, then it would have made a world of a difference. So that's
Absolutely.
definitely something that drives me to continue to do what I'm doing now.
Of course.
But yeah.
It's interesting because as I do these interviews, sharing people's stories who are going
Mhm.
through a similar experience such as yourself, I'm learning that this feeling of isolation is like the forefront of the emotions that people deal with. And I think
Yeah.
it's a main reason why so many people like yourself come to social media to share their journey.
Mhm.
And, because you're helping others feel less alone, but you're also garnering support for yourself. I think it's
Mhm.
crucial in navigating these experiences and finding strength, in each other's shared experiences,
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's such a common ground. Like, I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think you have to feel this intense um feeling of isolation and loneliness, and you can pick a path. I think
Yeah.
you can pick a path of wanting to share that with others and be vulnerable, and or you can
Mhm.
pick a path of continuing to be isolated, and you kind of have to go the right way in order to
Yes, of
build
course.
yourself back up. But
So during this period of profound isolation in your life, you turn to running as a coping mechanism. So could you delve deeper into how running specifically impacted your journey? What was it about running that resonated with you and provided such significant support?
yes, I would love to talk about that. So, like I said, when I came back from school, we were in the depths of COVID, and no one was seeing each other. No one knew what was going on. So I had always been, you know, I mean, an athlete. Like I had always enjoyed movement, and I loved soccer by the most by far, and I
Mhm.
loved basketball and lacrosse and other sports, but I wasn't, I love my sisters, but they would definitely come in the backyard and play with me. But like if I wanted to like kick the ball around or, pass a lacrosse ball or something. But one of them was in Boston on the front lines as a nurse. We were kind of all over the place. And I knew I needed some sort of movement that didn't involve other people, that I kind of had to do on my own. And I had always like been fine with running, but I never ran more than a mile or 2 miles because you know, when you're on a sports team, like you run, but like you're kind of doing more sprinting than running. So, anyways, I went out for a run like, a couple of weeks after I got back from school because of COVID, and I did a little 2 mile loop, came back to my house, and the next day I did it again. And my neighbor, her name is Madison,
Mhm.
she was furloughed from her job in New York City at the time. And she is a huge runner and was a big marathoner. And she had done like multiple marathons at that point. And she and I grew up across the street from each other, and we were close, but we weren't, nearly as close as we are now.
Sure.
Um, so she caught me at the tail end of my 2 mile loop and was like, why don't you do two more with me? I'm doing four.
Mhm.
And I was like, like no.
Sounds like
Um,
me.
yeah. I was like, but I, I A wanted the company and appreciated the
Sure.
company, and B, I was like, I'll just try it. So, anyways, I ended up doing another 2 with her, and I was like, okay, I could do 4 miles. Like, that's a big accomplishment for me.
Mhm.
And she was like, why don't we meet again tomorrow and do it again? So, anyways, we met again the next day and the next day. And when you run with someone, by default, you talk to them, unless you're both putting headphones in. But one of my favorite things to do is run with people and talk, because I think it can be A, it makes the run go by faster, and B, you get to know people really well
Mhm.
through movement and conversation.
Absolutely.
And so I told Madison everything that had happened, about my diagnosis, how isolated I felt, how, terrified I was. And she just listened and learned, and was really open with me. And that's exactly what I needed at the time. So thinking back to it now, I think I kind of put running and vulnerability in the same category for me. And I was like, wow, it feels so good to move my body, but also to get this off my chest and like feel like I have this confidant who's listening to me, and
Yeah.
wants to share this, like, wants to share this burden with me pretty much.
Right.
Um, so Madison and I continued to become closer and run every day. And then she suggested that I do a half marathon, because I had told some of my friends in college, and I had told my boyfriend at the time and his family, and obviously my family, but no one in my like circle in Maine and at St. Lawrence and other parts of my life really knew what was happening. And maybe why I wasn't saying hi back to them at the coffee
Mhm.
shop, or why I wasn't saying hi back to them as they walked by me on campus. So I knew I needed a way to tell people. And I knew I wanted it to be something positive, not like, oh, I was diagnosed with this thing and what was me. I needed it to be uplifting, and because that's how I wanted to move through life with this.
Wow.
Um, so she suggested we do a half marathon and turned it into a fundraiser. And I had never dreamed of running 13.1 miles, but she suggested, I think she suggested a marathon, and I was like, no. She was like, and I was like, okay, let's do a half marathon. So, anyways, all the half marathons were postponed or canceled because of COVID. So we decided to do our own around my town. And we ran 13.1 miles. I told everyone in my life what was happening, and we raised $20,000 for the foundation fighting blindness. And it was like
That's
best day of my life,
wonderful.
best experience ever. And it's now led me to the career I'm in now, and also to my life now as a marathoner, and I guess I could say now ultra marathoner. So
Wow, that's wonderful. First of all,
yeah.
we're partners with the Foundation Fighting Blindness, so that's
Oh, they're
wonderful
they're
to hear.
amazing.
And my second thing was talk about like the universe like stepping in and like bringing you guys together because you guys
Mhm.
seem to really both need each other, in that
Yeah,
in those times of your life, and I think that's just
so true.
absolutely beautiful.
Mhm.
Did you run in the Boston Marathon this past week?
No, I wish. No, I ran Boston Marathon last year, so I ran
Okay.
2023. I spectated this one in
Oh,
2024, and I was like,
cool.
oh, I need to run again 2025.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ran 2023.
That's one awesome. The more I
Yeah.
learn about your story, the more inspiring you are, genuinely.
Oh my God, Jillian, that's so
Stop.
nice.
Stop. It's true. Your senior year of
Oh,
college looked a lot different than most, and yet you persevered and didn't let your vision impairment stop you from living and achieving milestones. And I think that's a huge testament to your strength and resilience. So
thank
it,
you.
it, it
That's
needs to be
so kind.
noted.
Thank you.
So what are your goals, as you enter this new part of life as a 26-year-old? There's so much that changes during this part of life. These experiences can be both exciting and challenging for any person. Like I know myself, I'm navigating entering the workforce and seeing life outside of school. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious what your goals are as you continue.
I have a lot of goals that probably all filter up to a main goal for me, which is
Yeah.
to, and this has been sort of the same um, goal I've had for a while, but it just gets more and more important to me, and it takes different forms, I think. And that is basically to be the person that I needed when I was first diagnosed for others. So, you know, it was like jumping off a cliff when I found out that I had Stargardt disease. There was not much out there. I didn't see a lot of people that were living life with this, that, you know, were living these full, beautiful lives. It was hard to find. It wasn't like I could go on social media and see a blind person, um, you know, like out there in the world like I wanted to be.
Right.
And I think now with like, the influx of Instagram and TikTok, and it's gotten bigger and bigger even since I was in college, I find more of it, which is amazing.
Mhm.
Um, but I just want, my main goal is I want anyone out there with vision loss of any kind
Yeah,
to feel like they have a friend in me and someone to, you know, look up to, look next to, look down on, like someone to be their beacon of hope and light. And um not only that, but someone that will respond to them and answer them and get on the phone with them if they need, anyone that's in the same, that's experiencing the same thing to talk to. Like
of course.
and that's why I started Brightside, my support group, is because I saw this need of like, there was this gap. It was like, there's the Stargardt disease support group on Facebook, but it's so condensed and it's so there's so many people, and I think it can feel a little bit daunting. Like when I was first
Yeah,
diagnosed, I didn't really know, like, what do I post? How do I get in touch with people?
sure.
Like I needed like a
Hmm.
smaller avenue. Um, and I needed positivity and people to tell me that everything is going to be okay. So that was my main goal, is just to make sure that others know that you can live this amazing, full, rich, beautiful life, and you can do anything that anyone else can do, no matter what your limitations are. So my other little goals would be just to continue posting and continue speaking on behalf of the visually impaired community. It's interesting because like I have my experience, but I've also connected with so many other young men and women, and older and even
Yeah,
younger men and women that have completely different experiences. Diagnosed at age 7, some are diagnosed at 77. Like that's what makes the condition so crazy and so unique.
mhm.
um, but yeah, Stargardt disease is my superpower, and I believe that everyone else that has it can be theirs too if they let it. So
I
that's my
love, I love that. I love that
thing.
you turn it into, like you said, a beacon of hope instead
Yeah.
of seeing it as something that's happening to you. It's happening for you. So my next question, my hero is all about recognizing those that have embraced life's challenges and turned it into something powerful and hopeful for others. So can you share ways in which you have not let your own obstacles define you?
I love that question. Yes. So like I said, when I was first diagnosed, I had which I think a lot of people do. I had an idea in my mind of what a blind person was.
Hmm.
I had this stereotypical image of someone holding a white cane or having a seeing eye dog or wearing dark glasses in a brightly lit room. All those things that you think of when you think of blind, because as we grow up, we're fed images and pictures and ideas of what blind people look like, and the same goes for, I'm sure, like people with hearing loss and other disabilities.
Right.
Um, but I know that with hearing loss, like you don't necessarily have to have a hearing aid or cochlear implant. Like hearing loss can look different too, just like blindness. Like you don't have to have that cane or a seeing eye dog. It's such a spectrum. Um, and so I just decided that blindness was going to be is going to look exactly what it needed to look like for me,
Mhm.
and that I wasn't going to let myself, now being identifying as a blind woman, be you know any different than what Evan O'Neill would be as a
Mhm.
fully sighted woman. Like I'm still going to do all the same things, I'm still going to act the same way, I'm still going to pursue the same career, um, and strive for things that I think maybe could be so far out of my reach, but still going to strive for them. Like regardless, if I wanted to be a race car driver and I was diagnosed with this, I would still be trying to be a race car driver.
Yeah,
Like if there's a will, there's a way. So um, yeah, I never want it to define me except for the ways that it made me a better version of myself and a more open and understanding and kind version of myself. I think it has just made me a better version of who I am. I think it, like, I can now see the world and see people sort of in a different way. Like you just never know what anyone's going through or dealing with. It doesn't matter
absolutely.
what they look like or how they act. You know, there's always there's always a story behind each person that you see. So yeah, I'm only gonna let it continue to bring positivity into my life.
Absolutely. Like you nailed it right on the head. Like when I came across your TikTok, I had no idea that you had Stargardt's disease at all. I just was like,
Yeah,
oh, this girl is running 10 miles. I can never do that. Wish I could. And then I
yeah,
did my research. I
yeah,
was like, oh, not only is she running 10 miles, she's fully, has a vision impairment. So it's
yeah.
just really inspiring. So what would you tell your younger self knowing what you know now?
I would tell my younger self, Evan, everything's gonna be okay. I know you feel really sad right now and confused and scared and like, what is this and what's going on? But it's only going to bring the best opportunities, people, and positivity and silver linings into your life. It's going to change your life, yes, drastically, but and there are going to be bad days. There are going to be days that you wish this was never happening and that you feel like, why me? But I promise you the good days are going to outweigh the bad days. And just keep being yourself, keep powering your life with kindness, fueling your life with kindness and openness. And don't be afraid, because you're going to live a full, beautiful life because of this, not because of the limitations it brings, because of
Absolutely.
the positivity it brings.
That's beautiful. So thank you
Yeah.
for your authenticity and vulnerability today. You were truly a hero. And here at My Hero 360, we're looking forward to seeing all the marathons you run in the future and seeing the rest of your journey unfolds. We value and appreciate the impact you've made on the world. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jillian, for having me and for asking the most beautiful and eloquent questions. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate this opportunity more than anything. I hope I can come back. I want to come back
Yes,
and
we
give
would
more to
love
you
to.
guys. This is
Yeah, we
awesome.
would love to collaborate with you in other ways for sure.
Yes,
So
I would
you're,
love that.
yeah, thank you.